and RCW 35A.21360, which severely limits encampments. And the city code allows up to a 5-year temporary encampment. But what is missing here is a change to Bellingham Municipal Code 20.15A, which are permanent facilities. That should be carefully thought if that's appropriate for downtown. And then with regard to the Parberry development agreement, again, you've heard from a lot of people that ought to be relooked at. That plan was developed in about 2003. It's now been 17 years of no success. And meanwhile, the Lighthouse Mission's ministry has grown, and so they should be involved in that decision-making process. Be vigilant, City Council, because what you're hearing is, oh, it's going well. We have less police calls. This is really working with the neighbors. People are picking up trash. All of that's true, but that does not minimize the long-term, very detrimental impact to the downtown, which is essential to the health of Bellingham. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
The next person is Jacob Gist.
Go ahead, sir. You there, sir? Okay, Elizabeth, go the next name.
Sure. The next one is Amia Froese. Not sure if I'm saying that right.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it's Amia Froese. I am the owner of Saratoga Commercial Real Estate, downtown business owner, tenant, and we also manage several properties within the a 2-block radius of the Low Barrier Shelter. So I just want to kind of echo some of the comments from Frank. We are receiving a lot of concerned calls and emails from tenants in the area, as well as property owners, for a few different reasons, one of which is just the increased traffic of those potentially under the influence with mental illness, whether it's stopping into businesses, stepping out into the road, being on the corners, blocking the sidewalks. And several of the tenants that we manage are commenting that their customers and clients are not feeling safe. A lot with COVID restrictions, sometimes clients of a business have to wait outside. And I have one tenant who informed me that she's received calls that her customer would not wait outside because she didn't feel safe out on the sidewalk. And we've already received 2 notifications from tenants who have stated, because of the decline of downtown, the different waste and those congregating in alcoves, alleys, human waste in alleys, that they are going to be moving out. I have tenants who have informed us that even though they have term left on their lease, they're considering moving elsewhere. And it's discouraging from a property owner and management standpoint that this is only 2 months in to a potentially 4-year undertaking. And we really want to support the services, but the business owners are worried, and as our property owners facing vacancies that they may not be able to fill. So again, these are long-reaching impacts that I don't know if we will be able to get them back if something isn't done for those folks who maybe aren't looking for help. They're frequenting base camp just because of their, they have a place to go and be fed and clothed, but maybe aren't actually seeking help as a step out of homelessness. And so those are the ones that I think we just need to figure out what can be done to help support neighboring businesses and property owners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next person is Jessica Todd.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Mayor Fleetwood and Council, thank you for having me tonight. I come to you as a concerned citizen who has resided in Bellingham for the past 4 years. I realize I should not be surprised by the Council's 6-0 vote in favor of extending the sit and lie laws as they pertain to public areas surrounding base camp. Our city council has time and time again made it clear to the public that despite literal cries for help from our unhoused population, the council's interests are chiefly maintaining loyalty to the Bellingham Police Department and protecting the interests of those with the most concentrated amounts of wealth. For a city that claims progressive values, for a police department that claims to be magically immune to systemic racism, the decision to impose a ban on existence in the area surrounding base camp seems odd. Seth, you attempt to proclaim such a vested interest in the livelihood of the marginalized members of our community, yet you do nothing to stop this. You smirk at the idea of tackling the job that is dismantling systemic racism. Your sheriff and chief of police save face by snooping, tracking, and intimidating peaceful protesters, many of whom are extremely young and are practicing their legal right to speech and assembly. When you ban citizens from occupying public space, as you have done today, you directly oppose your constituency that is begging for a reduced police presence and an increased concentration on legitimate and accessible public services. For the past 5 nights, hundreds of Bellinghamsters have gathered in these streets both peacefully and loudly to express their disgust with the system that has murdered Breonna Taylor and hundreds of thousands of other Black and Indigenous people of color. That same system exists here in Bellingham and thrives every time our police exercise their power, lawfully or not. We are calling on city council members to truly educate themselves and acknowledge that no police department is immune to the genocidal history of policing in the US. As an institution that was founded in slavery and continues to thrive off of generational violence towards BIPOC community members, the police must necessarily be drastically defunded if your true goals lie in dismantling systemic racism in Bellingham. Every day that you refuse action, every day that you withhold funding from emergency shelter initiatives and accessible social services, you send the message that you are not listening. You also reinforce the fact that you are part of the problem. Please resist complacency or resign. Thank you. I yield the rest of my time.
Next.
Kanui Rappaport.
Good evening, council members and community members. My name is Kainui Rappaport, and I've lived in Bellingham for over 3 years now, where I've worked, rented and studied as a healthcare worker, as a nursing student, and I've been involved in different work around this area. And I am disgusted to hear the outcome of the meeting earlier today that rubber-stamped an ordinance criminalizing homelessness. By this, I'm referring to the protection zone around the new base camp shelter, where cops can potentially harass people for lying on sidewalks, for sitting there 24/7. I imagine by now you have gotten many messages and emails before that meeting and since then, and expect resistance upcoming. I've lived in areas where people have been affected by this type of sit and lie bans that criminalize people for their presence on a public property. I've been houseless before, and this policy would have affected me. I don't need to remind you that we are in a pandemic, that many people are at continuing risk of being evicted, out of job, and with increased stress. If someone becomes homeless, what can they do? Only one large shelter exists that is largely religious-based and advocates this type of ordinance that does not nearly serve the entire population of homeless people that is easily 5 times its capacity. Where does one go if they can't go into a shelter? The streets. If they can't go to the streets, they get a ticket. If they've lost their job, don't have much resources, it rains hard, their ticket gets wet, their fines add up, they get arrested, they go to jail where the risk of COVID is high, and which is at capacity and shouldn't exist in the first place. I encourage you all to revoke the ordinance that you have approved today. Revoking this would take a step forward in recognizing our houseless population as not disposable, but as deserving dignity. This isn't the only thing you can do. You can also support the construction of a non-religious homeless shelter, fund public housing, and stop the sweeps. This isn't a houseless problem, this is an allocation problem. One of the places we could get funding from is our police overbloated budget. To remove the spending that they do, $180,000 to sweep the encampments. More info on how that allocation could take place, please visit defundbpd.org. No doubt the privilege shows in this city council. Not one of these members here is a renter. All have been enforced by the police union. Soon many of you will be up for election. What legacy would you like to leave? Additionally, smoke may come in Tuesday night or Wednesday in the morning, increasing pressure for the homelessness. Business owners can shelter in, homeless people have no protection. Criminalizing these people does not resolve this issue. A customer doesn't feel safe at a business. How about having nothing, few resources with their possessions on their back, at constant risk of being arrested and fined, hurt by another person who has suffered because of the same position? Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Person is Alex McLean.
Hello, City Council and Mayor Fleetwood. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Longtime fan, first time caller here. I was hoping that I'd have the image that I sent earlier. It was a map of the Parbury site on Whatcom Creek. I sent it through email. Anyway, let's start there. You had a committee meeting during the afternoon regarding the Parbury site. And I'm hoping that you invest some effort to try and get something for the public benefit and for habitat improvement, rather than just handing over millions of dollars worth of the public property to a developer down there. That comment stands on its own. It's pretty unimpeachable. I think what I proposed here was to try and get jalapenos moved to the Parbury site so we can restore that section of the creek and provide a green public space as entry to the waterfront district. That just seems like a really solid idea and doable. It's just a land swap. I submitted this idea about a year ago, and I'm hoping for some feedback before the ink dries on Parbury. I also wanted to comment about the York neighborhood's docket regarding the blighted hellscape that is the bus barn site. It should offend citizens here that staff is recommending blocking this because it might somehow irritate the property owners with changes in their land uses. And yet the Planning Commission agenda for Thursday also seems to have no problem doing exactly that in residential multi-zones. The only difference here, again, is between whether a proposal benefits developers, such as in the residential multi-zones or at Parbury's, or whether it's a proposal based on the habitat or environmental concerns of this community. The staff response couldn't be more biased on showing that one idea is okay and the other one is not. City Council needs to create a master plan for Whatcom Creek. Storing hundreds of cars directly atop the critical areas overlay is barbaric and embarrassing for this community. Constantly giving out waivers for glassy condos to be slapped upon the riparian zone is also becoming distressing. I testified about a dozen times last year about issues up and down this creek from top to bottom, and the one takeaway I repeatedly encountered was that the city has no plan, no 100-year vision for what this creek should look like in 100 years, or how to improve the habitat in totally intractable and belligerent sites like the school district's bus barn. I was begging you to pay attention then. I'm still begging now. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next person is John Cruz.
The comments refer to two items that were discussed during the Council's Committee of the Whole meeting earlier today. My first comment regards the shelter protection area. I would like to thank city staff for putting together this important first step. We would personally like to thank the council members for their insightful comments regarding the role of this as a starting point for more comprehensive solutions in the future. This brings us to what is needed to make proposed action meaningful. Proposed action is intended to affect negative behaviors, but with no one to educate and if necessary enforce these measures, they may not be effective. Lighthouse Misison staff has made it clear that they do not have the authority to take actions outside the boundaries of their property. The dedicated officers of the police department, whose role this is, are facing unfortunate budget cuts, which may lead to the need to reduce downtown staffing. This could reduce much the desired safety effects for users of the base camp, as well as members of the surrounding community. Fortunately, the city has at its disposal the solution to this problem. The need for a temporary low barrier shelter was brought on by the COVID pandemic, and the government COVID funding was appropriately used to pay for it. The one item that was not budgeted for at that time was the need for additional safety and security measures in the area around the shelter due to the presence of those deemed by the Lighthouse Mission as being too dangerous to allow into the shelter. Fortunately, the city is about to receive additional COVID funding, which makes the timing perfect to specifically budget some of those funds to provide the necessary police presence in the area currently being affected around the low barrier shelter. Regarding this, I want to take a personal note to strongly applaud Gene Knutson for his presentation this afternoon on the tremendous value of Bellingham's police officers. Thank you, Gene. My second comment refers to the Parbury Development Agreement. We first want to thank Tara Sundin for acknowledging some of our concerns by deleting the paragraph referring negatively to the Lighthouse Mission facilities. In its introduction to the proposed amended development agreement, city staff pointed out that, quote, the primary purpose of a development agreement is to provide predictability and certainty for development, unquote. This predictability and certainty is important not just for the primary developers, but also for other property owners and businesses directly affected by the proposed development. In this case, the other primary property owner in the area is the Lighthouse Mission Ministries. The city's vision for their future in this area is critical to their future planning, as well as for others who are directly affected by their future in areas such as the Central Business District. The unpredictability and uncertainty that is currently stifling planning and investment in parts of the Central Business District can largely be resolved by addressing, in this or any other Old Town Development Agreement, the city's position and intent regarding the future of the Lighthouse Mission Ministries in Old Town, as well as LM's ability to build a planned new facility there, which would include a necessary low barrier shelter. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our thoughts and concerns.
Thank you.
Next person is Rebecca Meloy.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Good evening, council members. I've lived in Bellingham, worked in Bellingham, and shopped in downtown and Old Town for 40 years. I have entered the Bay Street intersection somewhere between 145,000 and 500,000 times in 40 years with my vehicle, unfortunately. I have 3 issues tonight: the homeless, the Holly Street closure, and illegal structures. I am concerned about the homeless safety for this winter season. It is a Bellingham crisis. You are not providing for the upcoming hazard for our homeless community. You are allowing sweeps and destruction of homeless tents, their clothing, their private belongings. I know there are many that are sick. They have tossed into the streets for medical reasons, but that's no reason to kick them out and arrest them and make them wrong and feel violated and shamed because they are homeless, poor, and broken. Yet you allow the building of winter pergola structures on public property in the center of Holly Street at Bay Street at the 200 block of West Holly. You guys call it a creative a creative project. Your mayor does. He calls it a creative project to block a historic arterial throughway with an obstruction. This is the first time in public history that the city of Bellingham has ever blocked any downtown street for more than a weekend or for a street fair. Blocking it for 2 weeks or for 2 months and possibly permanently. This is outrageous. All structures at that location have not been permitted from the permit department. All are illegal, and not one of those structures built in that 1 block street have not been inspected. I am a union carpenter, and I am concerned about the public safety sitting under roofed pergolas that could collapse in the wind, collapse under snow. There is no adequate foundation. It is outrageous that they have been allowed to be built with no permitting process and oversight. I am concerned about the public safety and the use of these illegal constructions in the center of our closed Holly Street arterial. Importantly, why do you allow illegal structures on this 16,000 square foot closed public right-of-way and arterial? It's a main arterial to the airport, to the jail, to the U.S. Post Office, to the museum, to WorkSource, to Old Town. The arterial has to be unblocked. It has to be unblocked. And our homeless.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you very much.
Next person is Hannah Fishman.
Just remind everybody, you do have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm a member of Whatcom DSA. I'm appalled to learn that the city is considering a so-called protection ordinance around base camp that would effectively serve to further criminalize homelessness in the city. I urge you to vote this ordinance down. The fact that this ordinance is even being considered and appears to be moving swiftly and easily through this council is even more infuriating, considering the mayor and city council's response, or lack thereof, to the thousands of people urging you to defund the Bellingham Police Department. It appears that a handful of business owners complained, and the city leapt into action to further criminalize the houseless in our city rather than allocate resources from violent policing towards actual housing for those experiencing homelessness. Meanwhile, the mayor was witnessed laughing with friends about the People's Budget Assembly rather than making any real commitments to those sharing their traumatic experiences with the Bellingham Police Department. Similarly, not a single member of City Council has made any real commitments to the many, many people contacting you in support of defunding the police and allocating that money towards housing and social services. Do you represent the actual people of Bellingham, or do you truly represent business owners and the wealthy who profit from the exploitation of the majority?
Thank you very much. Next.
Karen Kunkel?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. All right, babies. It is not climate change. It's a climate emergency caused by the top 100 polluting and consuming corporations on Earth. I think home garden plus rain barrel incentives sound fantastic. It is not a decline of downtown. It is the failure of a colonialist, consumeristic, capitalistic, fascist state, which apparently every single one of the city council members is happy to partake in. What was your name? Amia Froese? You must be frozen because, of course, homeless people want to take steps out of homelessness. But it's hard to take steps when there are literally no programs to help them and they are punished for existing. It does not disgust me to see a person covered in filth lying on the street. It disgusts me that they will be fined for lying in the street. It does not disgust me to see someone wasted and out of control. Maybe they're even crazy. Maybe they're a danger to themselves. My heart goes out to them. It disgusts me that they will be fined, jailed, beaten, experience more trauma simply because they are homeless. It disgusts me that each one of you city council members would vote to expand and embolden more violence from the police upon the homeless. What the heck are you thinking? This is the worst. This is the worst. These are our most vulnerable neighbors. And you are just expanding the violence that can be done to them. You all are in such position of power to try something new. Why don't you try a different creative project? Why don't you put money into de-escalation training instead of investing in police violence? I have lived in Bellingham 15 years now. I vote, and I've lived out of my car before, and it's just luck and privilege that I'm not homeless. Someone else earlier in this meeting, talking about COVID, said, how do we support people in getting them back to seeing their family and friends, even though we can't be as safe as we want to be? How do we go about giving people healthier tools? How do we not do an all or nothing mentality and tell people they are bad if they're not doing it wrong? How about those same questions are posed towards our homeless populations? These are real people. How about not punishing people for existing? How about not punishing people for not owning property? Huh? How about that? Because you don't punish people based on their actions. You don't punish people based on their addictions. You punish people whether or not they own something. I'm sick of it! Holly Huffman, did you vote for this shit?
Thank you very much. Next.
Next person is Markis D. Stidham.
Good evening, esteemed council. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, D-Man.
Okay, I just want to get to you guys. I want to thank you for your attention to this. I too must share that I'm disappointed in the way the vote went in the committee of the whole today. I think it was actually a major mistake, barring the fact that as Michael Lillquist was observing, that he said that he was okay with going forward with it as long as it was in context. In context of what, I might ask you? In context of what he was alluding to was, of course, great services that must be just around the corner. We're sitting on millions of dollars, guys, and it's going to burn up if we don't turn it into beds. Are we not going to turn it into beds? Are we going to let the money burn? We must deliver these services. I drove past the base camp yesterday morning, Sunday morning at 8:45, and the entire zone that you guys just regulated against was full of people. there was, I don't know, maybe 100 plus, maybe close to 150 people all around the base camp in that area. I wasn't sure what I was looking at. Large groups of people, no masks, big congregations of them. Now, I understand that a big part of the reason you guys are doing this is to provide safety for those who are seeking shelter inside the 200 maximum limit base camp. But oh my God, we're just in for it this winter, guys. There's going to be so many more people than the handful that I saw outside there yesterday morning. And you just pushed them into everyone's neighborhoods, into their backyards, into the parking lots all around Bellingham, or put them in jail. We've got to have something better. Now we have the money. We have pallet shelters down in Everett. They're ready to move with you and get sheltering up here. You know darn well that the camp cleanups policy that we just got is brand new. The BPD has been operating without a policy whatsoever. And Chief Dahl has been promising us all that he's been keeping up with the CDC recommendations and adjusted his policy, which did not exist all summer long. Now we have a policy. It references the Ninth Circuit Court. The Ninth Circuit Court has on line 8 specifically a little clause about how sitting and lying down laws can be exempt from the Ninth Circuit Court decision. That's lame. Why are you looking so hard to persecute the homeless instead of help them? That's a lot of work to look for that loophole in a federal case. So we need to start working harder, guys. We need to embrace this. The COB acknowledges the Ninth Circuit Court findings. And guess what? Rick Seppler's running around saying that the people outside of the base camp, many of them are banned from being in there. These are people who cannot take advantage of the shelter. This is cut and dry admission that we are in violation. On July 25th, Chief Dahl told us in a meeting, myself, Hannah Stone, others, that he was going to try to find a health department representative to bring them into compliance with what the CDC recommendations were on sweep. Well, that hasn't been done either. And it still hasn't been done. So we're still wrong.
Next person is Michael Stoothoff.
Hi, yeah, I'd like to echo concerns as well. First, I saw that you all approved a public hearing meeting for environmentalism concern, as in a public feedback, and didn't give us any input at all. This is a very big issue, and we all as a citizen society should be able to address it. I also want to talk about homelessness and the fact that you said that teens and young youth are perpetuating COVID and the biggest people who are infected. And we know that a lot of homeless people are youth and are not able to isolate because they're not allowed to camp in public. I've read the police definition and their newest article that they put out about the camp sweeps, and they've left the definition of what a camp sweep is very broad and obscured, and it doesn't allow us any way to keep them from not targeting these people who shouldn't be. A lot of these people do become in compliance after being warned the first time, but that doesn't matter because there's no transparency in this process at all. You're facing your 4th winter in full public oversight and scrutiny of how inadequate our winter shelters are and the emergency shelters on top of that, and how slow that is, which we all know, and is not reacting in the times of cold weather as we've seen in the past winters. And what their citizens are having to do to save lives out here, we've told you about that, and it's crazy that you guys are not reacting and taking on and relieving the burden that the citizens are having to pick up for what you are not taking on. And with the eviction moratorium that's going to happen in January 1st, we're going to see another Klamath, never before seen event on top of this pandemic. And there will be hundreds of newly homeless citizens and with tarnished housing references. And these are people without homeless skills and are newly emerging on the street. And they're going to flood the already brimming homeless shelters that we know aren't enough for the people. You all admitted that we don't have enough for the amount of people. My own friend was recently banned from the base camp. He was banned before winter, and this might be his last winter. And no behavior and acting out other than having drinking. He, again, no acting out during his intoxication, but he's banned and his life is put at risk under the discretion of these Christian class in our community that don't value humans the same way that apparently the rest of our society is expressing. This would make sense, if it was just a day or two, and when he sobered up, give him some steps out of fucking dying. Pardon me. Frank Chmelik and Amia Froese expressed that there's also these people downtown outside the base camp, and a lot of these people are most likely people who aren't able to make the low barrier.
Thank you very much. I just want to remind people not to use any swear words at all. Please go ahead, Elisabeth.
Seth Greendale.
Hi, I'm also here to comment on the protection zone around the base camp. Echoing many of the previous commenters, I think this is an awful idea. And I also think that it really goes against a lot of the stated commitments from our council members towards anti-racism. I think there's been a lot of conversations in our community around anti-racism. And part of that is focusing on some me work, which is very important. But if it ends there and we don't see that me work turn into actual policy changes by our policymakers, it's a pretty hollow commitment. As we've heard, this proposal is meant to serve business owners at the expense of, like we've heard, some of the most vulnerable members in our community. It empowers the police, who, as has been said, are a deeply racist and genocidal organization, even in quaint little Bellingham, to ignore the civil liberties of homeless folks in the area. The police disproportionately harm Black, Brown, and queer folks, even in Whatcom County. And giving a racist organization extra latitude to target some of the most marginalized members of our community at a time of anti-racist animus is tone deaf to the point of being malicious. It feels intentionally malicious. I'd like to say that any of this was surprising, but when some of our council members ran on a platform riddled with racist dog whistles, like bragging about ending, quote, urban blight on Samish Way, I can't say I'm surprised. I can say that I hope to see that you demonstrate some of the growth you claim to be making towards anti-racism. I had hoped that we would see that by now, and I don't think we have. I hope to see you stand up for Black, Brown, and queer homeless folks against police oppression in the area. Thank you.
Next.
HK.
You there? Go ahead, Elisabeth.
Melissa Gregg.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Good? All right. It's me again. Woo, boy, I hope you guys are embarrassed. I really do. So I'm going to sum up what just happened. Instead of investing in HomesNOW and proper tiny shelters, you put them all in a low barrier shelter downtown and then refuse to do any more to house the additional homeless, because that wasn't additional beds. That was just the mission over again and revamped so it was safer for the 200 people, not all the other ones out in the forests and all over the place. Then when the inevitable happens and the businesses start to complain, you impose a no sitting law and arrest them. You give them 0 options and then punish them and give the same people who were just busted kidnapping homeless people and using them for pranks more power to arrest more homeless people. You're embarrassing. You might as well just look us in the eye and tell us you hate us. I mean, that's what you're saying. You can approve restaurants to take over whole streets in weeks, but spend months doing nothing with readily available pellet shelters and funds and several places to put them up. With all respect to Lisa, the poor don't own their own homes, honey, not anymore. It happened since the late 70s. We need services, not rain barrels. We need housing. We need places to live to put those rain barrels on. You're showing everyone where your priorities lie very clearly in this. And as a side note, bringing back the pay parking during the worst sales season in recent history is just salt on the wound of greed you've shown over and over. As of 7 p.m. tonight, base camp is full. What are you gonna do about it? It's right now. It's already full. What are you gonna do? Have a good night.
Next.
Doug Gustafson.
Hey, you guys can hear me, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay, cool. Hey, this is Doug, chairman of HomesNOW, not later. HomesNOW currently manages Unity Village, the first tiny home community for formerly homeless individuals in Bellingham, located in Fairhaven. I wanted to let you know that Unity Village continues to run smoothly and safely without a single major issue since we've been in operation for over a year. It's safer than many neighborhoods in town, and we're ready to do more. At the last Homeless Strategies Workgroup meeting for Whatcom County, I proposed that HomesNOW could use the former Safe Haven site located in the Whatcom 911 Dispatch Center parking lot. If that location is going to remain an empty parking lot like it is now, then it would be a really easy site to set up and get running as an alternative tomorrow to house people, because it already has all the water and electric hookups we need to set up a second village of around 15 tiny homes. And the Sunnyland neighborhood liked us when we were hosted there last time as a tent encampment. We do not require any government funding to make this work, and the construction of the new homes would be a community project for our volunteers and the general public. We're excited to get started if the city is willing to work with us on this site. We already have companies and organizations which have offered to build a number of the structures for free. We're ready to go. We have all the paperwork ready to turn in a proposal for that site, and we're hoping for input about the viability of the site that we're proposing. But in the absence of input, we will be turning in our proposal anyway shortly. On the discussion of sweeps versus cleanups, I would also like to add that many of the residents of Unity Village were previously campers before they became residents, and every one of them is better off than when I first met them. While there's many campers out there that we wouldn't be able to help, there are still many we can help and should help. And if we're given the opportunity, this is in the best interest of health and public safety and helps people repair from their trauma from being homeless. There is no one-size-fits-all solution, but if we're able to set up this second site, we'd be helping over 30 people into a stable living situation overall with our two sites and a decent chance to find permanent housing. I want the city to keep in mind that running Unity Village costs $1,500 a month to operate the entire thing, and we don't have paid staff, and we rely on residents themselves to manage it, and they do a great job. We can replicate this easily if only we had a spot to build on and keep helping. 4 walls and a roof isn't very expensive if there's no middleman. We are still waiting to hear back from the mayor about the possibility of using the former Safe Haven site, which has all the hookups we need, and we've been hosted there before with good results. We were hoping that we'd hear from the mayor sooner in order to refine our proposal, but in the absence of any input, we will turn in what we have regardless, and we hope that the current administration will consider it. I know that the council doesn't decide these decisions specifically, but I would urge the council to modify BMC 20.15.040 to allow for tiny home shelters to operate for more than 2 years. Thanks.
Thanks.
Last person signed up is Bridget Reeves.
Hello, thank you so much. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we are, Bridget.
Great, thank you. First off, I want to thank so many that have commented tonight, as well as council and the mayor and others with the city that have worked so hard to make sure that people have places to be at night. And we as a staff at the mission are really grateful, and I know people staying at base camp on Cornwall are also really grateful as well. Last night we had a total of 166 people at base camp on Cornwall. That is an increase from 138 the previous year. So it's about a 20% increase the last night from the previous year. And I put that out there just to put in context the increase in people that are coming to us for services, and I don't necessarily see that decreasing anytime soon with COVID and the financial impacts on our community here. We have, though, as many people have already mentioned, there's been a lot of positive things that have come out of base camp moving to its current location at the public market. We have had a decrease in 911 calls. It's a way more of a secure facility. The outdoor space is really helpful. The ability to social distance. We still have had 0 cases of COVID within this facility, which we're also really grateful for. But we have had some impacts throughout the neighborhood. And some of those impacts, yes, some neighbors spoke tonight, and there's been impact on neighbors. And there has also been impact on our guests that currently stay at base camp as well. And so folks that hang out around base camp that may not be engaging in services or trying to pursue recovery have also had a negative impact on our guests that are pursuing that recovery and that are pursuing those services. And so I think tonight, I really want to encourage a vote for approval or just continued consideration of the proposed protection area around base camp. And I realize that the area, the physical area itself is confined. It's a small area itself. It's very narrow in focus, the physical area, and the number of people that experience homelessness that come to base camp with cars is less than 5 people. And so the vast majority of folks are not actually with cars pursuing services at base camp. And hopefully there's another area that can come up that they can pursue services and be in cars someplace else or find another location. But the area surrounding base camp, we appreciate the work done on this protection area thus far. We also want to put out that there is space still at base camp. And so folks can come inside, and when staff do rounds, we invite them in. Our first response is not to call 911 to move somebody along, but we engage in conversation, we engage in trust building exercises, we engage, we build that rapport, invite folks in. Thank you so much for the time
Thanks,
tonight.
Bridget. Is that it, Elizabeth?
That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we'll now go to our council standing committees. The first council committee met this morning was Public Works and Natural Resources, chaired by Michael Lilliput.
Please